April 30th, 1943. Huelva, Spain. A Spanish fisherman named José Antonio Rey Maria pulls something from the Atlantic surf. Not a fish, a body. The corpse floats face down, arms spread, wearing the waterlogged uniform of a British Royal Marines officer. Chained to his wrist, a black leather briefcase. Within hours, Spanish authorities alert German intelligence. The Abwehr, Hitler's spy network, has waited years for a break like this. A dead British courier. Official documents. The briefcase is pried open with trembling hands. Inside, letters from Britain's most senior military commanders. Detailed invasion plans. The target isn't Sicily, as everyone assumed. It's Greece and Sardinia. The documents are pristine, official, stamped with the highest security classifications. Adolf Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, will read these papers. So will Hitler himself. They will move entire Panzer divisions based on what's inside that briefcase. But here's what they don't know. The corpse isn't a courier. He's a Welsh homeless man who died eating rat poison. The documents aren't leaked intelligence. They're fiction, written in a London basement. And the briefcase? It was chained to a dead man's wrist by 2 British intelligence officers who spent 3 months crafting the most elaborate lie in military history. The invasion of Sicily, 160,000 Allied troops, the largest amphibious operation ever attempted, will succeed or fail based on whether the Germans believe that a corpse with a made-up name, fake love letters, and theatre ticket stubs in his pockets is real. This is the story of Operation Mincemeat, the greatest con ever pulled, and it started with a memo about trout fishing. But to understand how a dead body changed the course of World War II, we have to go back to the spring of 1943, when the Allies faced an impossible problem, and a handful of spies realized that sometimes the most absurd idea is the only one that works. January 1943, Casablanca, Morocco. Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt sit across from their military commanders in a requisitioned hotel, and everyone in the room knows they're planning an invasion that might fail before it begins. The decision is already made. The Allies will invade Sicily that summer. Operation Husky, the gateway to Hitler's Fortress Europe. But there's a problem so obvious that even the Germans have figured it out. Sicily is the only logical target. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, has already told Hitler that Sicily is the coming target. German intelligence has war-gamed every possible Allied move in the Mediterranean. Sicily is the clear choice. It's 90 miles from Allied-controlled Tunisia. It commands the Mediterranean sea lanes. It's the natural stepping stone to mainland Italy. The Allies know this. British intelligence estimates that the Germans are reinforcing Sicily with additional divisions. Luftwaffe squadrons are being repositioned. Coastal defenses are being strengthened. The island is turning into a fortress. Here's the math that terrifies Allied planners. If the Germans concentrate their forces on Sicily's beaches, the invasion could become a bloodbath. They're planning to land 160,000 troops, 600 tanks, and 14,000 vehicles on hostile shores. If the Germans are waiting for them, dug in, prepared, concentrated, casualties could reach 30% or higher. The Allies need the Germans to look somewhere else. Anywhere else. But how do you convince Hitler that you're invading somewhere other than the most obvious target in the Mediterranean? How do you make the enemy ignore their own strategic analysis? Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, a 42-year-old British intelligence officer working in the basement of the Admiralty building in London, has spent months wrestling with this question. He's part of a small, eccentric team known as the 20 Committee, so named because the Roman numerals 20 form a double cross. Their job? Deception. making the Germans believe lies. They've had some successes, turned German spies, fed false information through double agents. But this is different. This requires something bigger, something the Germans can't ignore. Montagu's colleague, Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley, pronounced Chumley, because of course it is, has been equally obsessed. Cholmondeley is RAF intelligence, tall and cerebral, with a mind that works in lateral directions. He's been collecting ideas, schemes, anything that might mislead the enemy. And then one afternoon in September 1942, someone hands Cholmondeley a memo. It's titled The Trout Memo, written by Rear Admiral John Godfrey, Director of Naval Intelligence, and his personal assistant, a former journalist and stockbroker named Ian Fleming. Yes, that Ian Fleming. The memo is a list of ways to deceive the enemy, inspired by fly fishing techniques. Most of the ideas are wild, impractical, even absurd. But there's one entry that makes Cholmondeley stop cold. Number 28. A corpse dressed as an airman, with dispatches in his pockets, could be dropped on the coast, supposedly from a parachute that has failed. I understand there is no difficulty in obtaining corpses from mortuaries, and it is a question of what they have just died from. Cholmondeley reads it again. A corpse. Fake documents. Let the enemy find it and believe what they read. It's insane. It's gruesome. It requires obtaining a dead body, dressing it up, creating an entire fake identity, and dumping it in the ocean with the hope that the Germans will believe it's real. But here's what Cholmondeley realizes. It might actually work. November 1942. London. Ewan Montagu walks into the office of Sir Bernard Spilsbury, Britain's most famous forensic pathologist. He's about to ask a question he never imagined he'd need to ask. Can you help me find a corpse? This is the first hurdle, and it's a massive one. They need a body. Not just any body. It has to be the right age. Military age. Somewhere between 30 and 40. It can't show obvious signs of disease or injury that would look suspicious to a Spanish or German autopsy. It has to be believable as someone who drowned at sea after a plane's crash. Oh, and one more thing. They need the family's permission, or at least they need to obtain the body without anyone asking too many questions about what they're planning to do with it. Spilsbury considers the request. He's examined thousands of corpses, testified in famous murder trials, literally wrote the book on forensic medicine. This is the strangest request he's ever received. But Britain is losing the war. If a dead body can save thousands of living soldiers, Spilsbury will help find one. The search begins quietly. Montagu and Cholmondeley can't advertise what they're looking for. They contact coroners, hospital administrators, mortuary attendants. They need someone unclaimed, or someone whose family might consent without asking too many questions. Weeks pass. Bodies are suggested, examined, rejected. One is too old. One shows signs of disease that would be obvious in an autopsy. One died in circumstances that leave marks inconsistent with drowning. And then, in late January 1943, they get a call. A 34-year-old man has died in a London warehouse after ingesting rat poison. The coroner believes it was accidental. The man was homeless, possibly ate food contaminated with poison meant for rodents. He's been dead for several hours before being found. His name is Glyndwr. Spilsbury examines the body. The phosphorus from the rat poison has damaged the liver, but in a way that might be consistent with prolonged immersion in cold seawater. If a Spanish doctor performs a cursory autopsy, and Spanish doctors in 1943 are not likely to be thorough with what appears to be a British drowning victim, it might pass. Montague faces an ethical calculation. Glyndwr Michael has no family, no permanent address, no one to mourn him. He died alone and anonymous. But in death, he could save thousands of lives. They take the body. Michael is placed in a special canister filled with dry ice. They need to preserve him for months while they prepare the operation. The canister is stored in a London mortuary, and very few people are told what's inside. Now comes the truly audacious part. They have to turn Glyndwr Michael into someone the Germans will believe is real. This is where the operation becomes equal parts espionage thriller and absurdist theatre. Montague and Cholmondeley understand something crucial. German intelligence officers aren't stupid. They'll examine every detail. The documents have to be perfect, yes. But more importantly, the man carrying those documents has to be real. Not just plausible, real. They start with the name. William Martin is deliberately common. There are dozens of William Martins serving in the British military. If the Germans try to verify the name, they'll find references, which actually helps the deception. Rank: Captain, Acting Major, Royal Marines. Recent promotion. It explains why he might be trusted with sensitive documents, but isn't yet widely known in military circles. Military identity number: 148228. Forged, but consistent with Royal Marines numbering systems. They acquire an actual Royal Marines uniform, size it for the body, dress it carefully. Rank insignia, badges, everything correct. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. Montague and Cholmondeley realize that if a courier drowns carrying secret documents, the Germans won't just examine the documents. They'll examine him. They'll turn out his pockets. They'll look for anything that seems out of place, which means they have to fill Major Martin's pockets with the mundane debris of an actual human life. Over several weeks, they assemble the pocket litter that will make or break the deception. A wallet. Inside, £7 in cash, the equivalent of about a week's pay for a captain, receipts from a London taxi, a London bus ticket dated April 24th, a receipt from the Army and Navy Club dated April 23rd, a bill from the Geeves Military Tailors for £42, 3 shillings and 6pence, a substantial amount, Martin clearly just bought, his new uniform, and a stern letter about the overdue bill. This detail is genius. If Martin just received his promotion, he'd need a new uniform. If he was recently promoted, he might not have been paid yet. The debt makes him human, slightly careless with money. Exactly the type of young officer who might be given a sensitive courier job, but wouldn't be entrusted with anything higher. Cigarettes and matches, specifically Players cigarettes, a common brand. The pack is partially used, some are missing. One is bent, as if he'd been carrying them in his pocket for days. A theatre ticket stub from the Prince of Wales Theatre, dated April 22nd. The show, Strike a New Note, a popular review. Seat number clearly visible. Here's why this matters. The Germans can verify this. They can check that this show was playing on this date, that this seat exists. The ticket is real. Cholmondeley bought it himself, attended the show, kept the stub. Keys. 2 keys on a ring. One appears to be for a house or flat. One is for a military locker. Neither opens anything important, but they're worn, used. Martin has places, possessions, a life beyond this mission. A photograph. This one requires careful thought. It shows a young woman, attractive but not glamorous, the kind of woman a junior officer might realistically be dating. She's smiling at the camera. Personal, but not intimate. Her name, they decide, is Pam, and Major Martin is in love with her. This is the piece that will make Martin seem most real. And it's the most elaborate deception within the deception. Cholmondeley knows a woman named Jean Leslie who works in British intelligence. She agrees to help, to become, in effect, the fictional girlfriend of a dead man. She poses for photographs, and she writes letters. The letters are extraordinary. They're not dramatic or overly romantic. They're ordinary. They're the kind of letters that real couples write in wartime, filled with small complaints, affection, mundane details, inside jokes that no one else would understand. One letter talks about a weekend they spent together. She mentions his father sending him money. She gently scolds him for not writing more often. She talks about planning their future together, hints at marriage. I've been trying to get hold of you at your office all day, but you're always out, one letter reads. I'm terribly afraid that my notepaper situation is now desperate. You did promise to get some more for me. Notepaper, the kind of detail no one would fake. Another letter. William Darling, I've just had the most dreadful experience. I went to see Romeo and Juliet last night, and the girl playing Juliet was absolutely atrocious. I kept thinking how much better you would have directed it. She's establishing that he's cultured, interested in theatre. It connects to the ticket stub. Everything interlocks. But here's the detail that borders on perverse brilliance. They include a jeweller's bill for an engagement ring. £53, 10 shillings. Expensive. Recently purchased. There's a letter from a jeweller on Bond Street asking when Major Martin plans to collect the ring. The implication is clear. Martin is engaged, or about to be. He bought a ring. He's carrying these letters because he loves this woman, because he reads them over and over during the loneliness of wartime service. If a German intelligence officer finds these letters, reads them, examines the photograph of Pam, sees the receipt for an engagement ring, how can he possibly think this is fake? What kind of elaborate hoax would include romantic letters about notepaper and theatre reviews? They have the body. They have the identity. They have the personal effects that make Major William Martin seem like a real human being who lived and loved and owed money to his tailor. Now they need the documents that will actually change the war. And this is where the operation becomes truly dangerous, because the documents have to be good enough to fool Adolf Hitler himself. They have to be official, detailed, strategic. They have to look like they were never meant to be seen by German eyes, which means Montagu needs access to Britain's most senior military commanders. He needs their signatures, their official letterhead, their cooperation in crafting a lie so elaborate that even German intelligence experts will believe it's real. And he needs Winston Churchill's personal approval to use a dead man's corpse as a weapon. The paperwork is about to get very, very real. April 1943. London. Ewan Montagu sits at his desk with 2 letters that have been signed by some of the most powerful men in Britain. One is from General Archibald Nye, Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff. The other is from Lord Louis Mountbatten, Chief of Combined Operations. Both letters are, from beginning to end, lies. This is the genius at the heart of Operation Mincemeat. The documents can't look like planted intelligence. They have to look like personal correspondence that was never meant to be secret, which happens to contain information that reveals secret invasion plans. If the Germans find a document stamped Top Secret, Invasion Plans, they'll immediately suspect it's too convenient. But if they find personal letters between senior officers written in casual tones that happen to mention troop movements and strategic targets, that looks real. General Nye's letter is addressed to General Harold Alexander, commander of Allied ground forces in North Africa. It's written on official War Office letterhead, dated April 23, 1943. The signature is real. Nye himself signed it, understanding fully what it will be used for. The letter opens with casual military gossip. We have had recent photographs of the 2 men you are after. I am enclosing herewith 2 copies of each. It mentions the man you are after, and various administrative matters. Boring stuff. Exactly what high-ranking officers write to each other. And then, almost as an aside, we have had a good deal of difficulty in finding the right people to take over the job of planning the cover operations for Husky Sicily. In the end, we have selected a very good man, Brigadier, but he won't be available until after the 10th of May. Cover operations for Sicily. The letter continues, discussing the real invasion targets, but not Sicily. It mentions making the Germans think we are going to attack Sardinia and Greece, describing these as the cover plan, the deception. But here's the trick. The entire letter is the deception. By presenting Sicily as the real target that needs a cover plan, the letter implies that the actual targets are Sardinia and Greece. The Germans, reading this, will think they've caught the British in their own deception, that Sicily is the cover story, and Sardinia, Greece are the real targets. It's a double bluff, a lie wrapped inside a lie. The second letter is even more brilliant in its casualness. Mountbatten writes to Admiral Andrew Cunningham, Commander-in-Chief Mediterranean, introducing Major Martin. "Dear Admiral," it begins, "I promised VCIGS, Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff, i.e., Nye, that Major Martin would arrange with you for the onward transmission of a letter he has with him for General Alexander. It is very urgent and very hot, and as there are some remarks in it that could not be seen by others in the War Office, it could not go by signal. I feel sure that you will see that it goes on safely and without delay." The letter goes on to discuss sardine fishing, of all things. Mountbatten mentions that he's been trying a new type of lure. He asks Cunningham to look into improving the equipment for combined operations commandos. Sardines, fishing equipment. Then, almost as an afterthought, I think you will find Martin the sort of man who should prove useful to you. It's perfect. A senior commander introducing a junior officer, mixing official business with personal interests, treating the secret letter as urgent but not dwelling on it. Exactly how these communications actually happen at high levels. But Montague and Cholmondeley aren't done. They add more layers. A letter from Martin's father, dated April 19th, written on letterhead from the Naval and Military Club. It's warm, paternal, slightly fussy. The father mentions sending William £10, asks about his health, mentions that your mother is well but sends her love. The father is worried about William's new promotion, hopes he's not taking on too much. The letter is typed on an actual typewriter from the Naval and Military Club. If the Germans investigate, they'll find the club is real. The letterhead is authentic. Identity documents. Martin's military ID card, complete with photograph. Here they face a problem. The photograph has to look like a dead man who's been in the water for days, but also has to look like a living officer for the ID card. They solve this with a photograph of an intelligence officer who vaguely resembles the corpse, taken at an angle that makes the face less distinct. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. And corpses don't look like their photographs after days in the ocean anyway. A stern letter from Lloyd's Bank about Martin's overdraft of £79. The letter, dated April 14th, requests that Major Martin reduce this excess at your earliest convenience. It's printed on actual Lloyd's Bank letterhead. Montague obtained it through official channels with the bank's cooperation. The briefcase is well-used black leather, the kind issued to military officers. It's attached to Martin's wrist with a chain, standard procedure for couriers carrying sensitive documents. The chain is looped through the briefcase handle and locked to his wrist with a small padlock. But here's a detail that could make or break the deception. The chain isn't hidden under his sleeve. It's clearly visible. Why? Because if Martin drowned in a plane's crash, struggling in the water, his sleeves would have ridden up. Hiding the chain would look staged. Everything has to survive German scrutiny. Montague imagines Abwehr officers examining every inch of the body, every document, every item. What would make them suspicious? What would convince them it's real? Before any of this can happen, Montague needs permission from the very top. In March 1943, he briefs Winston Churchill on the plan. Churchill reads the proposal, looks at the fake documents, considers the audacity of using a corpse to deceive Hitler. His response? All right. But the body must be placed in the water as close to the Spanish coast as possible, and every effort must be made to ensure that the briefcase and its contents wash ashore. Churchill approves. The Prime Minister of Great Britain has just authorized the most elaborate corpse-based deception in human history. Now they just have to get Major Martin to Spain. It's April 28th, 1943. Everything is ready. The body of Glyndwr Michael, now dressed as Major William Martin, lies in the special canister. The uniform fits. The documents are sealed in the briefcase. The chain is attached. The love letters are in his pockets, along with the theatre tickets, the cigarettes, the keys, the photograph of Pam. Montague and Cholmondeley have one more task. Get the body to a British submarine, which will carry it to the coast of Spain and release it into the Atlantic, where the currents will, hopefully, carry it ashore near the town of Huelva. Huelva is chosen carefully. It's in neutral Spain, but Spanish military intelligence in that region has close ties to the German Abwehr. If the body washes up at Huelva, the Spanish will find it, examine it, and, this is the gamble, show the documents to the Germans. Lieutenant Bill Jewell, commander of HMS Seraph, receives sealed orders. He's told only that he's carrying a special container that must be released at specific coordinates off the Spanish coast. He doesn't know what's inside. The canister, over 6 feet long and cylindrical, is loaded onto the submarine under cover of darkness at Holy Loch, Scotland. Jewell and his crew assume it's some kind of secret weapon or meteorological equipment. They nickname it the Secret. As HMS Seraph slips beneath the dark waters of the Atlantic, heading south toward Spain, Montague returns to London and waits. Everything now depends on whether the Germans will believe that Major William Martin was real. April 30th, 1943. 4:30 a.m. HMS Seraph surfaces 1 mile off the coast of Huelva, Spain. Lieutenant Bill Jewell orders the special canister brought to the conning tower. Only now does he open his sealed orders and learn what he's been carrying for the past 6 days. The orders are brief. You are carrying the body of a British officer. Place it in the water as close to shore as possible. Make it look like he died in an aircraft crash at sea. Jewell stares at his orders, then at the canister. He opens it. Inside, preserved in dry ice, is Major William Martin, Royal Marines in full uniform, dead, frozen, about to be used as bait in the greatest con in military history. Jewell later recalls thinking, "This is the maddest thing I've ever been asked to do." But he has his orders. The crew of HMS Seraph, sworn to secrecy, helps bring the body to the deck. In the pre-dawn darkness, they examine what they've been carrying. The body has thawed during the journey. Rigor mortis has set in, which is good. It will look more natural. But the smell is appalling. Decomposition has begun despite the dry ice. The crew fights nausea as they work. The briefcase is chained to Martin's wrist. His pockets are full. They can feel the wallet, the letters, the personal effects. Someone has even thought to put a spent match in one pocket, as if Martin had been smoking before the crash. But there's a problem, a potentially catastrophic problem. The body is too well preserved. It doesn't look like it's been in the water for days after a plane crash. It looks like a corpse that's been frozen and then thawed. One of Jewel's officers suggests a solution that borders on grotesque. They need to damage the body. Not obviously, but enough that it looks like it's been battered by waves, attacked by fish, consistent with days in the ocean. They can't bring themselves to do it. Not deliberately. Instead, they decide to let the ocean do the work naturally and hope it's enough. At 4:45 a.m., with the Spanish coast visible in the distance, they're ready. Jewel reads a brief prayer, Psalm 39. For I am a stranger with thee, and a sojourner, as all my fathers were. It's not official. There's no chaplain. But it feels necessary. They're about to commit a body to the sea, and even though this man is already dead, even though he's being used for deception, he deserves something. They slide Major William Martin into the Atlantic Ocean. The body floats, face down, arms slightly spread, exactly as a drowned man would. The briefcase, chained to his wrist, trails in the water. The currents begin to carry him toward shore. Jewel watches through binoculars as the sun rises. The body drifts, slowly, toward Huelva. HMS Seraph dives and slips away into the deep Atlantic. One of the submarine crew will later say, "We all thought he was going to get the Victoria Cross. That's how real he seemed to us." 9 hours later, at 1:30 p.m., José Antonio Rey Maria is checking his nets off Playa del Arenocillo near Huelva when he sees something in the water. A body, British uniform, an officer by the insignia. Rey Maria pulls the body ashore with help from another fisherman. They see the briefcase immediately, locked to his wrist with a chain. Within the hour, Spanish authorities arrive. The local police, then military intelligence officers. Someone telegraphs Madrid. British officer found drowned, carrying official briefcase. The Spanish face an immediate dilemma. Spain is officially neutral in the war, but General Franco's government leans heavily toward Germany. The Abwehr maintains a strong presence in Spain, and Spanish military intelligence regularly shares information with Berlin. But Britain is also watching. The British vice-consul in Huelva, Francis Hazelden, arrives at the scene quickly, almost too quickly, which will later make the Germans suspicious, though for the wrong reasons. Hazelden examines the body, sees the briefcase, immediately requests that it be handed over to British authorities unopened. The contents, he explains, are classified military documents. The Spanish promise to return everything. They're very understanding, very cooperative. They're lying. Behind closed doors, Spanish military intelligence officers carefully pick the lock on the briefcase. They photograph every document inside, every letter, every page. They work carefully, professionally. They know the British will eventually examine the briefcase and documents for signs of tampering. So they're meticulous. They use special tools to open the locks without leaving scratches. They photograph the documents in their exact, original positions. They note how the papers are folded, which direction they face. It takes hours. When they're done, they carefully relock the briefcase and reseal it. If a British officer inspects it later, he'll never know it was opened. The Spanish make multiple copies of the documents. One set goes to Madrid, another set goes directly to the German Abwehr station in Huelva. By evening of April 30th, German intelligence in Spain has every document that was in Major Martin's briefcase. Adolf Klaus, the Abwehr station chief in Huelva, reads the documents with growing excitement. He's been in Spain for years, feeding Berlin whatever scraps of intelligence he can gather from neutral Spanish sources. This is the biggest find of his career. Letters from General Nye, from Lord Mountbatten, discussing invasion plans, mentioning Sardinia, Greece, describing Sicily as the cover target. Klaus immediately cables Berlin, important captured documents. British courier drowned. Papers indicate invasion targets, Sardinia and Greece, not Sicily. The message reaches Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, within hours. Canaris is nobody's fool. He's been running German intelligence since 1935. He's survived Stalin's purges, Hitler's paranoia, and countless Allied deception attempts. He doesn't trust convenient intelligence. He orders a complete investigation. Verify the body. Verify the documents. Verify the courier. Check every detail. In London, Montague and Cholmondeley wait. They have no way of knowing if the plan is working. Did the Spanish find the body? Did they open the briefcase? Did they show the documents to the Germans? And if the Germans have the documents, will they believe them? British intelligence in Spain begins picking up fragments of information. Coded messages suggest the Germans are interested. Very interested. But are they convinced? Montague has planted one final detail that will tell him if the deception is working. It's a tiny thing, almost invisible. But if the Germans fall for it, he'll know. One of the letters mentions a specific type of landing craft that will supposedly be used in the Sardinia invasion. A craft that doesn't actually exist. If German intelligence starts asking questions about this non-existent landing craft, Montague will know they've swallowed the bait. All he can do is wait and watch the German deployments. Because if Hitler believes Major Martin is real, he'll move his Panzer divisions away from Sicily toward Sardinia and Greece, and 160,000 Allied troops will land on beaches that are less heavily defended than they should be. May 3rd, 1943. Berlin. Adolf Hitler's Chief of Staff, General Alfred Jodl, places 2 documents on the Führer's desk. They've just been transmitted from Spain, photographed by German intelligence. Hitler reads them, slowly, then looks up at Jodl and says, "This changes everything." The German investigation into Major Martin's documents is extraordinarily thorough. The Abwehr knows British intelligence is capable of elaborate deceptions. They've been fooled before, so they check everything. First, the body itself. German intelligence requests detailed information from their Spanish contacts. What did the autopsy show? How long had he been in the water? Were there signs of violence? The Spanish pathologist, Dr. Eduardo del Torno, performs a cursory examination. His report states that Major Martin died of asphyxiation through immersion in the sea, drowning. The body shows signs of having been in the water for 3 to 5 days. The phosphorus damage to the liver, which Spilsbury worried might be detected, is attributed to prolonged immersion and decomposition. Del Torno notes that there's a life jacket on the body, slightly deflated, consistent with a plane crash survivor who drowned despite the life jacket failing. This detail, which Montague carefully added, convinces the Spanish doctor that this was an aviation accident. The Germans check the identity. Wilhelm Martin. Common name. They find several W. Martins in British military records, which actually helps the deception because it seems to confirm he exists. The serial number on his identity card matches Royal Marines numbering systems. The uniform is authentic, properly worn, with correct insignia for his rank. They examine the personal effects. The theatre ticket? They verify that Strike a New Note was indeed playing at the Prince of Wales Theatre on April 22nd, 1943. The seat number exists. Someone actually sat there. The receipts? They check the taxi company, the Army and Navy Club, the Geeves Tailors. All real. All current. All exactly what a British officer would have. But here's what really convinces them. The love letters. German intelligence officers read Pam's letters to William Martin. They're intimate, affectionate, ordinary. They mention notepaper shortages, theatre performances, weekend plans. There's the jeweller's receipt for the engagement ring. One Abwehr officer will later write in his report, "No intelligence service would go to such lengths to create personal correspondence with such mundane details." The letters appear genuine. This is the genius of Montagu's approach. Professional documents can be forged. But who would fake a girlfriend's complaint about notepaper? Who would create love letters that are so boring? The Germans compare the handwriting across multiple letters. It's consistent. The same person wrote all of them. It was John Leslie, writing as Pam, maintaining character across multiple letters. They check the photograph of Pam. She's attractive, but not a model. She looks like exactly the kind of woman a junior officer would be dating. If this were a fake, wouldn't they use a more glamorous photograph? While the authentication continues, German military intelligence analyzes the strategic content of the documents. The Nye letter mentions Sardinia and Greece. It describes Sicily as the cover target. The deception meant to draw German forces away from the real invasions. German intelligence knows the Allies excel at deception operations. They've been tracking British deception efforts for years. So when they find a document that appears to describe a deception plan, they think, "Aha! We've caught them in their own trick. They want us to defend Sicily, so the real target must be somewhere else." It's a perfect double bluff. By making the Germans think they've discovered a deception plan, Montagu has actually deceived them more completely. Colonel Friedrich Adolf Krummacher, who heads intelligence assessment for the German High Command, writes a report to Hitler. The authenticity of the captured documents is beyond doubt. The letters are personal correspondence between high-level commanders. The strategic implications are clear. The enemy intends major operations against Sardinia and the Peloponnesus, Greece, with a diversionary attack on Sicily. On May 9th, Hitler convenes a strategy meeting at Berchtesgaden. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's submarine fleet, attends. So does Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. They review the intelligence from Spain. Hitler is particularly interested in Greece. He's always believed Greece is vulnerable. The idea that the British might invade there makes strategic sense to him. It would threaten the Balkans, potentially bring Turkey into the war on the Allied side. Hitler issues Directive Number 47. The discovered order confirms our assessment that the planned attacks will be directed primarily against Sardinia and the Peloponnesus. He orders immediate redeployments. The 1st Panzer Division, one of Germany's most elite units, is moved from France to Greece. Not Sicily. Greece. Additional infantry divisions are sent to Sardinia and Corsica. Luftwaffe squadrons are repositioned to defend Sardinia. Coastal fortifications in Greece are strengthened. Naval assets, including U-boats, are redirected to the waters around Sardinia and Greece. Sicily's defences are not substantially reinforced. Adolf Hitler has just redeployed his forces based on documents found in the pockets of a homeless Welsh man who died eating rat poison. In London, Montagu and Cholmondeley watch the German deployments through ultra-intercepts, the secret British program that has broken German military codes. They read the messages as they come in. 1st Panzer Division, movement orders to Greece. Luftwaffe reconnaissance, increase patrols Sardinia sector. Naval Command, concentrate U-boat patrols Western Mediterranean, focusing on approaches to Sardinia. Montagu reads these messages with a mixture of elation and disbelief. It's working. The Germans have taken the bait completely. But there's one final confirmation he's waiting for. He embedded a detail in one of the letters, a mention of a specific type of landing craft that doesn't exist. If German intelligence starts asking about it, he'll know they believe every word. On May 14th, an ultra-intercept reveals that German intelligence in Spain has sent a message to Berlin asking for information about British Type X landing craft specifications. Type X doesn't exist. Montagu invented it. The Germans are now trying to gather intelligence about a completely fictional piece of equipment because they believe Major Martin's documents are genuine. Montagu allows himself a small smile. Then he sends a coded message to the British forces preparing to invade Sicily. Mincemeat swallowed whole. On May 13th, 2 weeks after Major Martin's body was discovered, the Spanish authorities formally return his briefcase and personal effects to the British vice-consul in Huelva. The British immediately examine everything for signs of tampering. Montagu has embedded microscopic threads and tiny marks that would reveal if the documents were opened and photographed. The tests are conclusive. The briefcase was opened. The documents were photographed. But the Spanish and Germans were so careful that they almost left no trace. Almost. A small fibre is out of place. A fold in one letter is slightly different. Montagu knows the documents were compromised, which is exactly what he wanted. The British play their part in the deception. They file formal complaints with the Spanish government about the unacceptable delay in returning classified documents. They demand investigations into whether the contents were examined. The Spanish apologize profusely. They claim the delay was due to bureaucratic procedures. They insist the briefcase was never opened. Their denials convince the Germans that the British don't know the documents were compromised, which makes the intelligence seem even more valuable. On May 2nd, before the full implications of the operation are known, Major William Martin is buried in Huelva's San Marco Cemetery, with full military honours. The British vice-consul arranges everything. A Catholic priest performs the service. The Spanish insist on a Catholic burial. British sailors from HMS Dasher, a ship conveniently in the area, serve as pallbearers. The headstone reads, William Martin, Captain, Royal Marines, 2nd April, 1943, beloved son. The date of death is wrong. They chose April 2nd because that's when a plane crash in the Mediterranean would most plausibly have occurred, given when the body washed ashore. Several Spanish military officers attend the funeral. So do German intelligence officers, though they stay discreetly in the background. Everyone pays respect to Major Martin. The British honour a fallen officer. The Spanish fulfil their obligations to a drowned sailor. The Germans observe the funeral of a man whose documents are, at that very moment, changing Hitler's strategic decisions. Only one person in attendance knows the complete truth, Francis Haselden, the British vice-consul who helped plant the body and now watches it buried with full honours. Glyndwr Michael, the homeless man who died alone in a London warehouse, is honoured as a Royal Marines officer and buried with military distinction. In death, he has become more important than he ever was in life. It's early July 1943. The invasion of Sicily is days away. Allied troops are loaded onto landing craft, ready to storm the beaches. German forces on Sicily are present, but not at full strength. The 1st Panzer Division is in Greece. Luftwaffe squadrons are spread across Sardinia and the Balkans. Naval assets are watching the wrong approaches. The Allies have achieved what seemed impossible. They've made the Germans second-guess their own strategic analysis. But the operation isn't complete. Not yet. Because if the Sicily invasion is too easy, if German resistance is too weak, the Germans might realize they've been deceived. They might figure out that Major Martin was a plant. And if they figure it out, they'll never fall for a deception again. Every document, every captured intelligence, every piece of information will be suspect. The invasion of Sicily has to succeed, but it also has to look hard enough that the Germans never question why they were fooled. July 10th, 1943. 3 a.m. 160,000 Allied troops storm the beaches of Sicily in the largest amphibious invasion in history. They're prepared for catastrophic casualties, for dug-in German panzers, for a bloodbath that could destroy the invasion before it begins. Instead, they find beaches that are defended, but not as heavily as they should be. The invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, is far from easy. German and Italian forces fight stubbornly. The Allies face heavy resistance at certain points. But the crucial difference is this: the Germans are not concentrated where they need to be. The 1st Panzer Division is in Greece, 800 miles away. Additional divisions that should be in Sicily are scattered across Sardinia, Corsica, and the Balkans. Luftwaffe fighter squadrons that could have devastated Allied landing craft are positioned to defend against an invasion that will never come. Allied casualties are significant, approximately 5,000 killed or wounded in the first week. But intelligence officers estimate that if the Germans had positioned their forces optimally, casualties could have been 30 to 40% higher. That's thousands of additional deaths prevented by Operation Mincemeat. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, commanding British ground forces, will later write, "The success of the Sicily invasion was materially aided by the enemy's dispositions, which were influenced by a successful deception operation." By August 17th, Sicily is secured. The Allies control the island. The gateway to Italy is open. As Sicily falls, German intelligence begins a post-mortem analysis. How did they get this so wrong? They review the intelligence from Spain, the documents from Major Martin. The letters from Nye and Mountbatten clearly indicated Sardinia and Greece. And then someone asks the question that should have been asked in May: what if Major Martin wasn't real? Admiral Canaris orders a complete reinvestigation. They check everything again: the documents, the body, the personal effects, the theatre ticket. Real. The receipts. Real. The love letters. Thoroughly authentic in appearance. The identity. Checks out. The autopsy report. Consistent with drowning. But there's one detail that bothers them. A German intelligence officer named Alexis von Roen notices that the British vice-consul in Huelva, Francis Hasselden, arrived at the scene of the body's discovery unusually quickly, almost as if he knew where to look. Von Roena writes a report suggesting that the operation might have been a deception, but by now it's too late. Sicily has fallen. The intelligence, whether true or false, no longer matters. And here's what saves Operation Mincemeat from exposure. The Germans can't prove it was a fake. The body was real. The documents were authentic in their physical construction. The personal effects were genuine items. There's no smoking gun, no obvious forgery that proves deception. So German intelligence files the report with an ambiguous conclusion: documents possibly authentic. Deception cannot be ruled out. Quality of deception, if such it was, unprecedented. In London, Montagu and Cholmondeley breathe a collective sigh of relief. The Germans suspect something, but they don't know for certain. More importantly, the secret of Operation Mincemeat remains classified. The story of how Major Martin was created must never leak to the Germans, because if they learn the full details, they'll be on guard against similar operations in the future. Winston Churchill wants to tell the story immediately. It's one of the war's great successes, and he loves a good tale. But the intelligence services convince him to remain silent. Loose lips sink ships. Revealed deceptions prevent future deceptions. The secret is kept. Montagu doesn't tell his wife the full details. Cholmondeley says nothing to his family. Jean Leslie, who wrote the love letters as Pam, keeps the secret for decades. Lieutenant Jewell, who released the body from HMS Seraph, is ordered never to discuss it. Even after the war ends in 1945, Operation Mincemeat remains classified. The official files are sealed. Major Martin's grave in Glyndwr bears a name that isn't real, mourning a man who was never born. It's not until 1950 that the story begins to emerge. Ewan Montagu, no longer bound by wartime secrecy laws, receives permission to write a book about the operation. The book, titled The Man Who Never Was, is published in 1953. It becomes an instant bestseller. Montagu describes the operation in detail: the corpse, the documents, the personal effects, the elaborate deception. But he leaves out one crucial detail: the identity of the corpse. He calls him Major Martin throughout the book. He doesn't reveal that the body was Glyndwr Michael. He doesn't explain how they obtained it, doesn't describe the process of finding a suitable corpse. Why? Because the families who allowed their deceased relatives to be used in wartime intelligence operations were promised anonymity. Montagu honors that promise. The book is adapted into a film in 1956, starring Clifton Webb as Montagu. The film dramatizes the operation, adds romance, creates composite characters. It's Hollywood, but it introduces Operation Mincemeat to millions. And still, Glyndwr Michael's name remains unknown. It's not until 1996, 53 years after the operation, that historians discover the true identity of Major Martin. Roger Morgan, a researcher, finds documents in British archives that finally name Glyndwr Michael, the homeless man who died eating rat poison, the corpse that deceived Hitler. Morgan contacts Spanish authorities. In 1998, the grave marker at Glyndwr is quietly updated. It still reads, William Martin, Captain, Royal Marines. But a small additional plaque is added, acknowledging Glyndwr Michael. Michael's family, scattered across Wales, learn that their relative played a role in one of history's greatest deceptions. Some are proud. Some are disturbed by the use of his corpse. The ethical questions remain complicated. Was it right to use a corpse without full informed consent? Glyndwr Michael couldn't consent. He was dead. His family, such as it was never consulted in 1943. Montagu wrestled with this. In his writings, he notes, we were fighting for survival. Thousands of lives would be saved if this deception succeeded. In war, the ethics are different. Charles Cholmondeley, in a later interview, put it more bluntly. He died alone and forgotten. We gave him a purpose. We gave him a name people remember. We gave him a military funeral and a marked grave. Would he have objected? I hope not. Modern ethicists debate the operation. The use of human remains for deception crosses boundaries that wouldn't be acceptable in peacetime. But war creates desperate circumstances. The consensus among historians: Operation Mincemeat was justified by the outcome. Thousands of lives saved, a crucial invasion succeeding with lower casualties. But it represents a moral complexity that shouldn't be celebrated uncritically. Operation Mincemeat has influenced intelligence operations for 8 decades. The principles it established: elaborate backstories, multiple layers of authentication, physical evidence that can be examined, have become standard in deception operations. The CIA studied Operation Mincemeat during the Cold War. Israeli intelligence used similar techniques in operations against hostile states. British intelligence continued to employ notional agents, fake identities, supported by elaborate documentation. But the operation also demonstrated the limits of deception. It worked once, spectacularly, but the Germans learned from it. After Sicily, German intelligence became more skeptical of convenient document discoveries. They questioned everything more thoroughly. You can't pull the same trick twice, at least not without significant variation. Beyond Sicily, Operation Mincemeat had strategic consequences that echoed throughout the war. The success of the Sicily invasion led directly to the invasion of Italy in September 1943, knocking Italy out of the war. German forces that were misdeployed to Greece and Sardinia were slow to redeploy to Italy, giving the Allies crucial momentum. The operation demonstrated that large-scale deception could work, which influenced Allied planning for D-Day in 1944. Operation Fortitude, the deception campaign for D-Day, used similar principles on a much larger scale. Hitler's willingness to believe the mincemeat documents made him more susceptible to later deceptions. His strategic judgment, never perfect, was further undermined by the realization that his intelligence had been compromised. What happened to the people behind Operation Mincemeat? Ewan Montagu continued in intelligence work after the war, eventually becoming a judge. He received the Order of the British Empire for his service. He died in 1985, having spent decades as the keeper of the mincemeat secret. His obituaries mentioned the operation prominently. It was his legacy. Charles Cholmondeley returned to RAF intelligence duties, later worked in civilian aviation security. He rarely spoke about the operation, considered it just one of many wartime activities. He died in 1985, the same year as Montagu. John Leslie, who wrote the love letters as Pam, married and lived a quiet life. She gave occasional interviews about the operation in later years, always emphasizing that she was just doing her duty. She found it strange that people were so interested in letters she'd written as a favor to intelligence officers. She died in 2012 at age 96. Lieutenant Bill Jewell, commander of HMS Seraph, continued submarine service throughout the war. He was decorated multiple times. He died in 2004, having finally been able to tell the story of the strangest cargo he ever carried. Sir Bernard Spilsbury, the pathologist who helped find Glyndwr Michael's body, continued his forensic work until his death in 1947. He never publicly discussed his role in Mincemeat. Glyndwr Michael remains buried in Huelva, Spain. His grave is maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. British veterans occasionally visit, leaving flowers and notes thanking him for his service. He died alone, forgotten, in a London warehouse. He was given a name, a rank, a history, and a purpose. In death, he became a hero. In 2010, British intelligence declassified additional documents related to Operation Mincemeat, among them letters between Montague and Cholmondeley discussing the operation's success. One letter, written in June 1943, contains a remarkable admission. Montague writes, "We were extraordinarily lucky." If the Germans had been slightly more skeptical, if the Spanish pathologist had been more thorough, if any one of a dozen details had gone wrong, the operation would have failed spectacularly. We were good, but we were also very, very lucky. Cholmondeley's response: "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. We prepared meticulously. We were lucky that the opportunity arose, but I maintain we earned that luck." 70 years after Operation Mincemeat, certain questions remain. Did the operation really change the outcome of the Sicily invasion, or would the invasion have succeeded anyway? Most historians believe the deception saved thousands of lives, but the counterfactual is unknowable. Was the use of Glyndwr corpse ethical? The debate continues. His death served a purpose, but he never consented to that purpose. Could such an operation succeed today? Probably not. Modern forensics, DNA testing, digital verification systems would make it nearly impossible to create a fake identity that convincing. Operation Mincemeat was a product of its time, an era when documents were physical, identities were paper-based, and a well-crafted lie could change history. In 2022, a small memorial was erected in Westminster, London, honouring the participants of Operation Mincemeat. It includes the names of Montague, Cholmondeley, and, prominently, Glyndwr. The inscription reads, "In memory of those who gave their lives and those who gave their deaths in service of freedom." Operation Mincemeat succeeded because of details, not the grand strategic deception, not the high-level planning, but the small, absurd, human details. Theatre ticket stubs, love letters complaining about notepaper, an unpaid tailor's bill, a photograph of a woman who agreed to become the fictional girlfriend of a dead man, cigarettes with one bent, keys that opened nothing important. These details made Major William Martin real enough that German intelligence officers trained to spot deceptions believed he existed, real enough that Adolf Hitler moved Panzer divisions based on documents found in his pockets. The operation proved something profound. In intelligence work, truth isn't defined by facts. It's defined by believability, and believability comes from details. The smaller and more absurd, the better. Glyndwr died alone in 1943, poisoned by accident, forgotten by the world. But in death, he became Major William Martin. He carried fake invasion plans in a briefcase chained to his wrist. He had a girlfriend named Pam who wrote him letters. He owed money to his tailor. He went to the theatre on April 22nd. He never existed. But he helped win a war. And that's a legacy that no amount of truth can diminish. The corpse fooled Hitler. The absurd details made it believable. And thousands of soldiers who would have died on Sicilian beaches lived to go home. Sometimes the greatest truth is a perfect lie.